A werewolf shifter romance story. Prologue. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only constant in Catherine's life, a sterile counterpoint to the endless parade of demands from her boss. Another late night, another takeout container growing cold on her desk. She squinted at the spreadsheet, her eyes burning, a familiar ache in her temples. For 3 years, she'd been Justin's executive assistant, a ghost in the gleaming tower of Blackwood Enterprises. She handled everything, from million-dollar contracts to the bizarre requests he sometimes made, like the specific brand of imported bottled water that arrived only on a full moon. No questions asked. Her life was spreadsheets, deadlines, and the crushing weight of her mother's medical bills. Tonight, the silence of the executive floor was broken only by the frantic click of her keyboard. Josh, Justin's stern beta and head of security, had somehow messed up the data for a critical presentation. It wasn't Josh's fault, really. He was a good man, fiercely loyal to Justin, but details sometimes flipped past him. Catherine, however, thrived on details. She saw the misplaced decimal, the unaligned figures, the tiny error that could unravel everything. She worked swiftly, her fingers a blur, correcting the mistake and resaving the presentation. "Still here, Catherine?" Justin's voice, deep and resonant, startled her. She hadn't heard him approach. He stood in the doorway of her office, a shadow against the city lights, his gaze unreadable. He had a way of moving, a stillness that always put her on edge. It wasn't human, but she always dismissed the thought. "Just finishing up Josh's file, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. He nodded slowly, his eyes sweeping over her, a flicker of something she couldn't name in their depths. "Good work," he said, and the rare compliment was a jolt. He paused, then added, "Be in my office at 8 a.m. sharp. We need to discuss something personal." Catherine's heart clenched. Personal discussions with Justin usually meant an impossible task or a late-night flight. She swallowed, nodding. As he turned and walked away, the scent of powerful male cologne lingered in the air. Catherine dismissed it as the expensive cologne she probably couldn't afford. In his opulent office, Justin stood by the massive window, looking down at the glittering city, the $2 billion deal. It was within his grasp, but there was one final obstacle, the Silver Pack's insistence on a fated mate. His gaze hardened. He knew what he had to do. He just hadn't expected the answer to be right under his nose. Chapter 1. The billion-dollar proposal. The summons arrived on Catherine's desk at 7:59 a.m., a stark digital command flashing on her screen. Justin. Penthouse office. 8 a.m. sharp. Her stomach twisted into a knot tighter than any she'd ever seen in a spreadsheet. This wasn't a standard meeting. Justin never called her to his personal penthouse office unless something was gravely wrong or impossibly demanding. She smoothed down her skirt, adjusted the collar of her blouse, and took a deep, steadying breath. It was just a meeting, just her boss, but a cold unease pricked at the back of her neck. She stepped into the penthouse elevator, the brushed chrome doors gliding shut with a silent, almost predatory whisper. As the numbers climbed, she braced herself, reviewing every item on Justin's packed agenda for the day. Had she missed something? A crucial email, a forgotten signature, a detail that could derail the massive $2 billion deal everyone in Blackwood Enterprises was buzzing about? It was the kind of deal that could make or break the company, and Justin, the youngest CEO the city had ever seen, lived and breathed its success. The elevator chimed softly, opening directly into Justin's expansive office. The room was vast, an altar to power and precision. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying panorama of the cityscape, bathed in the sharp early morning light. The air was crisp, clean, devoid of the usual office chatter. Justin stood by the farthest window, his back to her, a dark silhouette against the burgeoning dawn. His shoulders were broad, his posture unyielding, a testament to the immense weight he carried. He didn't turn immediately, and Catherine felt the silence stretch, thick with unspoken expectation. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Catherine's voice was as steady as she could make it, betraying none of the apprehension that churned within her. She moved to stand before his imposing desk, hands clasped, ready to take notes, to spring into action, to mitigate whatever crisis awaited her. Justin turned then, slowly, deliberately. His eyes, usually a piercing, unyielding blue, seemed to shift, to deepen into a molten gold that held an unnerving intensity. For a fleeting second, Catherine felt a jolt, a primal instinct screaming that something was fundamentally different about him. The air in the room thickened, crackling with an unseen energy that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. He wasn't just her boss in that moment. He was something ancient, something more. "Catherine," his voice was a low rumble, deeper than usual, resonating in her chest. It felt less like a sound, more like a vibration. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew." Catherine's breath hitched. Her mind raced, grasping for a logical explanation. A new, impossible project? A sudden merger that would mean working 7 days a week? No. This felt different, more profound, more terrifying. "I am a werewolf, Catherine," Justin stated, his gaze unwavering, pinning her in place. The words hung in the air, surreal and impossible. Catherine blinked, waiting for the punchline, the hidden camera. This was a joke, right? Some elaborate, cruel prank to test her composure? But Justin's expression was deadly serious. His jaw was set, his golden eyes unblinking. A werewolf?" Catherine managed to stammer, the absurdity of the words catching in her throat. Her mind reeled. Werewolves were stories, fairy tales, legends. They weren't CEOs of multi-billion-dollar corporations. They didn't wear custom-tailored suits and dominate the stock market. "An alpha, to be precise," Justin continued, as if discussing quarterly reports, "of the Blackwood pack. My pack depends on me. Their future rests on the decisions I make, the deals I secure." He gestured vaguely towards the sprawling city outside, as if claiming it all. "And right now, their future depends on the Silver Pack." The Silver Pack, Catherine knew the name. They were the key players in the $2 billion deal, an old, traditional consortium known for their stringent requirements. She'd spent weeks preparing documents, analyzing their corporate structure, their history. Nowhere in the extensive files had it mentioned werewolf or alpha. "The Silver Pack," Justin continued, his voice regaining some of his usual corporate edge, though still laced with that strange, unsettling resonance, "operates on very old customs, very traditional. To secure this $2 billion contract, which, rest assured, is vital for my pack's expansion and stability, there's a specific, non-negotiable requirement." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her face with unnerving intensity. Catherine braced herself. This was it, the reason for the impossible meeting, the personal discussion. "I must present a mate," Justin stated, his words clipped, devoid of emotion. "A fated mate, one recognized by the ancient laws of our kind. It's a symbol of stability, of enduring lineage, of a leader's inherent strength." Catherine's mind raced, trying to process. A mate? He wanted her to find him a mate? Was this some new, bizarre personal assistant task? Was he asking her to organize a dating profile for an alpha werewolf? The sheer ridiculousness of it almost made her laugh. Almost. Then Justin took a step, closing the distance between them. The air around him shimmered with that strange energy that made her skin prickle. He stopped directly in front of her, his golden eyes locking onto hers, intense and unwavering. "And you, Catherine," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur that sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine, "are my mate." The words struck her like a physical blow. Catherine's breath left her lungs in a ragged gasp. She stared at him, her mind a blank, terrified canvas. Me? His mate? This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. The raw power emanating from him, the unblinking intensity of his gaze, the impossible golden hue of his eyes, it was all real. And suddenly she understood the inexplicable way he moved, the subtle shifts she'd seen in his pack members, the impossible workload he carried with such ease. I don't understand, Catherine whispered, her voice barely a thread. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Her logical, spreadsheet-driven mind struggled to compute. Fated mates? Werewolves? This was a nightmare, a terrifying, impossible dream. It's simple, Justin continued, his voice regaining its pragmatic tone as if divorcing himself from the absurd declaration. All shifters have a destined mate. One person who completes them, who they're meant to bond with for life. Finding your mate is rare, a gift most of us never receive. He paused, his gaze sweeping over her with a detached assessment that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. The bond manifests subtly at first, then intensifies with proximity, with interaction. I've felt it, especially these last few weeks. A pull, a recognition. My wolf, it recognizes you. He was talking about an undeniable bond, about destiny, with the same cold detachment he used to discuss profit margins. Catherine felt a surge of resentment, hot and sharp, cutting through her terror. He saw her as a tool, a means to an end. So, Catherine said, her voice laced with bitterness, you're telling me that I, your human secretary, am your destined mate? And you need me to pretend to be your happy traditional Luna for a $2 billion business deal? The words tasted like ash. Justin nodded, his expression unwavering. Precisely. The silver pack is notoriously old-fashioned. They demand a mate for legitimacy, for trust. My pack needs this deal. The funds are critical for expansion and securing our resources against rivals. There's no one else. You're here. The bond is undeniable. It's a practical solution. Practical solution! The phrase grated on her ears. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment, picturing her mother's tired face, the stack of medical bills that never seemed to shrink. This was a nightmare, but it was also a lifeline, an astronomical sum of money, enough to free them both from the crushing weight of debt, enough to ensure her mother got the best care. "What if I say no?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly, a desperate, foolish flicker of defiance. Justin's golden eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of steel entering their depths. "That's not an option I've considered, Catherine. My pack's future depends on this, and frankly, the bond is already forming. You'll find it uncomfortable to resist, very uncomfortable." His tone was not threatening, but undeniably firm, like a pronouncement of an immutable law. She knew then she was trapped. Trapped by fate, by circumstance, by the cold, calculating ambition of a werewolf alpha. "What would I have to do?" Catherine asked, her voice hollow. Justin said, "You'll live here." He gestured vaguely around the penthouse. "By my side. Attend functions, act appropriately. The silver pack will be watching closely. Your commitment, your apparent devotion to me, it all needs to be convincing." His gaze lingered on her, a chillingly pragmatic assessment. "You'll be paid handsomely, of course. Far more than you could earn in a lifetime." The astronomical sum he mentioned made her head swim. It was enough. More than enough. It was salvation for her mother, for herself. But at what cost? To be a prop? A pawn in a game she didn't understand, controlled by a man who saw her as a practical solution? I'll do it," Catherine finally said, the words feeling alien on her tongue. The resignation was heavy in her chest. She looked at Justin, at the cold, calculating glint in his golden eyes, and knew that her life, the one she had painstakingly built, was over. And a new, terrifying, and utterly unbelievable one had just begun. Justin nodded once, a brief, sharp movement of his head. Good. We start immediately. The first meeting with the Silver Pack is in 3 days. He turned back to the window, already dismissing her, already moving on to the logistics of his new acquisition. Catherine stood there for a moment longer, rooted to the spot. Her mind reeled, trying to process the impossible reality. Werewolves? Fated mates? A $2 billion deal? Her life, once predictable, had shattered into a million fantastical pieces. She felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage, trapped by a destiny she didn't want and a bond she didn't understand. Resentment coiled in her gut, bitter and cold. Justin, meanwhile, felt a faint, unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest, the mate bond settling in. He ignored it, focusing instead on the tantalizing numbers of the deal. His future. Their future. All secured. He just had to ensure his new mate played her part perfectly. He had no doubt she would. She was a professional, after all. Chapter 2. The Human Touch. The gilded cage of Justin's penthouse was nothing like Catherine had imagined. It wasn't bars, but towering walls of glass overlooking a city that now seemed alien. She awoke each morning in a bed softer than clouds, draped in silk, yet she felt more trapped than ever. Her own small apartment, with its familiar scent of old books and chamomile tea, felt a lifetime away. Here, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and something clean, cold, and utterly lacking in human warmth. Her room, as Justin had so clinically called it, was a guest suite of unimaginable luxury, but the invisible leash was palpable. Though no one explicitly forbade her, she knew better than to try and leave the penthouse without Justin's express permission. She was under constant, subtle surveillance. Pack members, always impeccably dressed in security uniforms or sleek business attire, were ever present. They moved with a fluid grace, their gazes quick and assessing, always landing on her with a mixture of suspicion and a veiled curiosity she couldn't quite decipher. Her days quickly fell into a new, unsettling rhythm. She continued her duties as Justin's executive assistant, but now her office was just steps from his, allowing for an unnerving level of proximity. The emails, the phone calls, the intricate schedules, they all remained. But interspersed with them were the new duties of a fake mate. There were fittings for designer clothes she could never afford, etiquette lessons she found stifling, and lengthy briefings on the preferences of the Silver Pack elders. Justin remained as demanding as ever, perhaps even more so. He expected her to anticipate his needs with superhuman precision, to seamlessly transition from corporate strategy to the facade of intimate partnership. Her resentment for him simmered, just beneath the surface, a constant low burn. He was using her, and the thought was a bitter taste in her mouth. She constantly reminded herself of her mother, of the medical bills, and the freedom the $2 billion deal would bring. That was her anchor. Yet, despite her efforts to maintain a professional distance, cracks began to form in her resolve. She saw Justin in moments she wasn't meant to. Sometimes, late at night, when she'd emerge from her office to grab a glass of water, she'd see him standing by the vast windows of his personal living area, a lone figure silhouetted against the glittering city. His shoulders, usually so squared with confidence, would slump almost imperceptibly. There was a quiet burden in his posture, a profound solitude that tugged at something deep within her. He was an alpha, a billionaire, a titan of industry, but in those stolen moments, he seemed profoundly alone. She also started noticing subtle shifts in his behavior towards her. At first, she attributed it to the act, his commitment to making their fake bond convincing. He'd hold doors for her, pull out her chair at the impossibly long dining table, or hand her a specific file without her having to ask, anticipating her need with uncanny accuracy. He had a way of looking at her, a fleeting intensity in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. It wasn't affection, she told herself, just attention to detail, part of the act. Then there were the arguments with Josh. Justin's beta was a constant source of quiet hostility. Josh, a broad-shouldered man with eyes as sharp as glass, made no secret of his disdain for Catherine. "She's human, Justin," Catherine overheard him say one evening, his voice tight with disapproval. "The Silver Pack will see through this. She's a risk, a liability." Justin's reply was clipped, his voice low and firm. "She's my mate, Josh. That's all they need to know." But the word mate sounded like a strategic declaration, not a loving one, and Catherine's resentment flared anew. She was a weapon, a tool, nothing more. One afternoon, Catherine was sifting through an old corporate archive, searching for obscure data related to a long-forgotten subsidiary company. Justin walked in, his presence immediately filling the large room. He didn't say anything, just watched her. I felt the subtle shift in the air when he entered, a heightened awareness that made my skin hum. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was unnerving. She finally found the relevant files, but they were a chaotic mess of outdated formatting and conflicting numbers. "This is a nightmare," she muttered to herself, rubbing her temples. "There's no logical system here." "What's the problem?" Justin asked, his voice unexpectedly close. "Oh, sir, just, the old data. It's a jumble, no rhyme or reason." She gestured to the overflowing box. "It'll take days to make sense of this, and you need it by Friday." Justin frowned, surveying the box. "It's for the Silver Pack. They're asking for legacy financials." He rubbed his back of his neck, a rare sign of frustration. "It's critical." Catherine took a breath. "If you don't mind a suggestion, sir," she began, "I could set up a cross-referencing system. It would take a few hours, but once it's done, you could pull any piece of information instantly. It would streamline all future archive searches, not just this one." It was a simple human solution, born from years of organizing chaos. Justin looked at her, his head tilted slightly, those intense golden eyes studying her. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and Catherine braced herself for dismissal, for a sharp reminder that her job was to assist, not to advise. But then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Do it." She spent the next few hours, focused, productive, creating order from the disarray. When she presented the perfectly organized, easily searchable digital archive to Justin, he simply gave her another curt nod. "Efficient," he commented, then turned back to his own work. It wasn't praise, but Catherine felt a small, unfamiliar flicker of satisfaction. Her skills, her very human skills, had been useful to him. As the days turned into a week, the mate bond began to manifest in more startling ways. When Justin was stressed, Catherine felt a tightness in her own chest, a phantom anxiety that had no logical source. If he was frustrated in a meeting, she'd find herself clenching her fists, an irrational urge to punch something. It was unsettling, like a constant hum just beneath her skin, a connection she couldn't sever. One evening, Justin returned from a particularly brutal negotiation with a rival company. He walked past her desk, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark. Catherine felt a wave of cold fury wash over her, so potent it made her gasp. It wasn't her own anger, it was his. She looked up at him, startled, and saw him rub his temples, a flicker of pain in his expression. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, the words leaving her lips before she could stop them. He paused, his head turning slowly. His eyes, still golden, met hers. For a moment, the raw, visceral anger she felt through the bond seemed to flow directly from him to her. Then, just as quickly, it receded, replaced by a profound weariness. "Just a long day," he murmured, his voice rough. He didn't dismiss her, he just stood there, silently for a moment, and Catherine realized she wasn't just observing him, she was feeling him. It was terrifying and confusing. Later that night, as she lay in the luxurious bed, the subtle hum beneath her skin intensified. It wasn't an aggressive feeling, but a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to emanate from Justin's wing of the penthouse. It was a constant presence, like a magnetic pull she couldn't escape. When Justin left the penthouse for an early morning run with his pack, Catherine felt a strange sense of emptiness, a void where the hum had been. The moment he returned, Tired, but energized, the feeling rushed back, warm and solid. It was undeniable. This was the bond he spoke of, a primal, inexplicable connection that transcended logic, transcended her humanity. The thought of it terrified her, yet also filled her with a strange, unwilling curiosity. She was his mate. Not just a secretary, not just a pawn, but something fundamental to him. The realization unsettled her deeply. Meanwhile, Williams, the rival alpha and CEO, began to make his presence felt. He often frequented the same exclusive business clubs and philanthropic events as Justin, always accompanied by his own perfectly groomed pack members. Catherine began to notice his piercing gaze on her, a cold, analytical stare that unnerved her more than Justin's intensity. Williams carried himself with an air of old money and ancient power, radiating a quiet menace that felt distinctly different from Justin's focused drive. One afternoon, Williams cornered Catherine at a charity luncheon. Justin was momentarily distracted by a powerful senator. Williams approached her with a practiced, charming smile, but his eyes were cold. "So, you're Justin's little mate. Such a surprise. A human. How unconventional." Catherine's spine stiffened. "I'm Catherine," she said, her voice firm, refusing to be dismissed. "Justin's partner." William's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Partner. But tell me, Catherine, does Justin tell you everything? About his pack? About his true needs?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Or are you just a temporary arrangement for a certain $2 billion deal?" A jolt of fear shot through Catherine. He knew. Or he suspected. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Justin and I are completely aligned," she said, her voice betraying nothing. "Our partnership is solid." It was a lie, but she hoped it sounded convincing. William simply chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "We'll see. The silver pack values authenticity, Catherine, and old traditions. Best not to be caught in a web of deceit. Wouldn't you agree?" He gave her a final chilling smile before drifting away. Catherine felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Williams was smart. And ruthless. He wasn't just after the deal, he was after Justin. And now, by extension, her. The weight of her new role, the immense stakes involved, pressed down on her. She was a human, caught in a world of powerful, dangerous shifters, and the pretense of her life was fragile. She knew then that her quiet observations and logical mind might be her only real weapons. Her survival depended on seeing what others missed. Chapter 3. The Unseen Advantage. The night of the gala arrived like a shimmering, inescapable trap. Catherine stood before the full-length mirror in her penthouse suite, clad in a dress of deep emerald silk. It was a stunning creation, tailored perfectly, a stark contrast to the sensible, understated clothes she usually wore. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrist, borrowed, of course, from Justin's vast collection. She felt less like herself, and more like an elaborate doll, dressed for a very specific, high-stakes performance. Justin had sent one of his stylists, a woman with unnervingly sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, to prepare her. "You need to look like you belong on his arm," the stylist had declared, circling Catherine like a predator. "Like you were born to this." Catherine knew the truth. She was born to spreadsheets and takeout, not ballrooms and billionaire alphas. Justin met her in the main living area, dressed in a tuxedo that seemed to cling to his powerful frame. He looked less like a CEO and more like a king. His gaze swept over her, a flicker of something unreadable in his golden eyes. "You look acceptable," he said, his voice flat. It wasn't praise, but given his usual demeanor, Catherine knew it was as close as she'd get. She bristled, but forced herself to smile. the practiced, empty smile she'd perfected in her corporate life. The venue was an old money estate, transformed into a dazzling spectacle of lights, flowers, and glittering people. The air hummed with a different kind of energy than the silent, calculating tension of Justin's office. Here, it was a dizzying mix of power, ambition, and something primal that made Catherine's skin tingle. She saw packs mingling, their unspoken hierarchies evident in every subtle glance and gesture. The air itself seemed thick with unspoken challenges and ancient loyalties. Justin kept her close, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. A possessive gesture, meant for observation by the silver pack, but Catherine felt the heat of his palm through the silk of her dress, a surprising anchor in the overwhelming environment. Whispers followed them like shadows. A human mate? Unheard of. Is he desperate for the deal? She'll never last. Catherine felt every word, every dismissive glance, a bitter reaffirmation of her outcast status in this new, terrifying world. She spotted Josh across the room, his jaw tight as he watched the proceedings. He offered her a curt nod that was more a warning than a greeting. His disapproval was a palpable thing. Catherine understood. To Josh, and others like him, she was an anomaly, a threat to their traditions and their alpha's standing. Then, she saw them, the members of the Silver Pack, their presence radiating an ancient authority. Their alpha, a formidable older wolf named Elder Gareth, sat at a central table, his gaze piercing. Justin steered her towards them, his posture radiating unyielding confidence. "Alpha Gareth," Justin greeted, his voice respectful but firm. "It is an honor." Gareth's eyes, like chips of obsidian, moved from Justin to Catherine, lingering with her with an intensity that made her want to shrink. "Justin," Gareth rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, "and this is your mate." The word was stretched, laced with unspoken skepticism. "Catherine," Justin introduced, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on her back, a silent assertion of his claim. "My fated mate." Catherine offered her practiced, diplomatic smile. "It's an honor to meet you, Alpha Gareth." Gareth's gaze remained cold. Human, most unexpected. "The bond is strong, you say?" "Undeniable," Justin replied, his voice unwavering. The underlying hum of the mate bond, which Catherine had come to recognize, seemed to thrum between her and Justin, a silent testament to his declaration, even if her own heart still felt distant. Throughout the evening, Justin's protectiveness, though part of the act, surprised Catherine. When a young, arrogant male from another pack tried to belittle her, Justin's eyes flashed with a warning that sent the male scurrying. When a female pack member made a snide remark about her dress, Justin subtly shifted, blocking Catherine from her view. He was protecting his asset, she reminded herself, but a small part of her felt a peculiar warmth. Later, as the evening progressed, the air in the grand ballroom grew thick with anticipation. The moment for a preliminary presentation to the Silver Pack was approaching. Justin had prepared meticulously. However, just minutes before their slot, a ripple of alarm spread through Justin's team. "Alpha," it was one of his junior executives, his face pale. "The market analysis for the subsidiary, it's gone, vanished from the shared drive." Justin's jaw tightened. "What do you mean gone? We just verified it." His voice was low, but edged with a dangerous fury. This was critical data, vital to demonstrating the project's profitability to the Silver Pack. "It's not just gone, sir," another executive stammered, pulling up a tablet. "A doctored version has been uploaded in its place. It makes the subsidiary look like a massive liability. And Williams just presented it to Alpha Gareth?" Panic flared in Catherine's chest. Williams. He'd done it. Sabotaged them directly. She felt a surge of Justin's frustration and cold fury through their nascent bond. It was almost an overwhelming wave of emotion. Justin's eyes, a blazing gold now, scanned the room. He couldn't have gotten access unless... His voice trailed off, a flicker of deep suspicion in his gaze. Catherine's mind, however, was already racing, analyzing, connecting data points she hadn't even known she possessed. Williams, the condescending questions about their partnership, the subtle sneer. She remembered preparing the original analysis herself, making copies, securing backups. She also remembered a brief conversation she'd overheard weeks ago, a seemingly innocuous comment from Josh about a new experimental data encryption method they were trying out. "Justin," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the rising panic in his team. "The backup, the encrypted one. Remember Josh was testing it out on the subsidiaries files?" Justin's head snapped towards her, his golden eyes piercing. "What are you talking about?" "The one he said was too complex for anyone outside your inner circle to access," Catherine continued, a sudden surge of clarity hitting her. "He mentioned it needed a specific, almost archaic decryption key, something to do with ancient codes?" She searched her memory, pulling information from countless random conversations and documents she had processed. "A pattern of constellations? A star chart for the autumn equinox?" Justin stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, terrifying understanding. "How do you know that?" he demanded, his voice low. "I overheard Josh talking about it with one of your tech specialists weeks ago. He thought it was overkill for a routine backup. But you insisted on testing it, right?" Justin's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something akin to awe or perhaps profound calculation entering them. He turned sharply to one of his tech team members. "Get me Josh, now, and access the encrypted backup, the autumn equinox, star chart." As Josh, looking bewildered, was quickly pulled aside by the tech team to work on the decryption, Justin turned back to Catherine. He didn't say anything, but his gaze was intense, searching. Catherine felt the connection between them hum, a silent current of raw data and frantic energy. She had given him a lead, a human, logical lead that his shifter team, focused on digital security, might have missed. The Silverpack elders were already looking impatient. Williams stood nearby, a smug, triumphant smile playing on his lips, believing he had won. Minutes felt like an eternity. Then a gasp from Josh. "Alpha, she was right! It's here! The original data, and there's a timestamp proving Williams's doctored version was uploaded just before ours disappeared." A triumphant roar erupted from Justin's team. Justin's eyes, now blazing gold, locked onto Williams, who visibly stiffened, his smug expression replaced by a mask of shock. Justin strode purposefully towards Alpha Gareth, the leader of the Silverpack, holding out his tablet with the newly recovered, time-stamped data. "Alpha Gareth," his voice resonated with cold authority, "it appears Williams attempted to undermine my presentation with fraudulent data. The true figures are here, recovered thanks to an unforeseen advantage." His gaze flickered to Catherine, a silent acknowledgement. Gareth, after reviewing the evidence, turned his icy glare on Williams. "Deception, Williams, in front of the Silverpack? This is a grave insult to our traditions." Williams stammered, his face paling, caught red-handed. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted, the tension now focused entirely on Williams's humiliation. Later, as the gala wound down, Catherine felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had genuinely helped, not as a prop, but as herself. She caught Josh's eye, and for the first time he offered her a small, almost imperceptible nod of respect. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a beginning. Justin found her near the exit, a rare, unreadable expression on his face. "Your unforeseen advantage saved us," he murmured, his golden eyes intense as they met hers. "Your insights are proving to be quite valuable." Catherine felt a flutter in her chest. Not resentment this time, but a confusing warmth. Her mind, her very human intellect, had contributed. He saw it. He acknowledged it. As they stepped into the waiting limousine, Justin reached out, his hand brushing hers. A jolt, undeniably electric, shot through her, making her gasp. She pulled her hand back instinctively, her heart pounding. Justin's gaze sharpened, his own eyes widening almost imperceptibly. The bond. It wasn't just a hum, it was a spark, a silent, undeniable force. And in that moment, for the first time, their fake relationship felt profoundly, terrifyingly real. Chapter 4. The Truth of the Bond. The fragile truce established at the gala shattered almost immediately. Williams, his pride wounded and his ambition unchecked, became a relentless shadow, intensifying his attacks on Justin and, by extension, on Catherine. His methods grew bolder, more personal. He began to circulate insidious rumors, not just within the corporate sphere, but subtly through the veiled channels of the shifter community. Whispers painted Catherine as a corporate spy, a gold digger preying on Justin's youth and desperation for the Silverpack deal. They insinuated that her mate bond was a cynical manipulation, a desperate play orchestrated by Justin himself to meet the Silverpack's archaic demands. The accusations were designed to erode trust, to poison both the professional deal and the burgeoning personal connection that Justin was trying to forge. Catherine felt the insidious tendrils of Williams' campaign. She saw the glances, sharper now, from low-ranking pack members in the halls of Blackwood Enterprises. The polite smiles of corporate acquaintances turned brittle. The weight of being an imposter, a human caught in a world of powerful shifters and their ancient customs, pressed down on her with renewed force. She found herself flinching from unexpected noises, her nerves frayed, constantly aware of unseen eyes. Justin, however, responded with a cold fury that was almost terrifying. He doubled security, implemented new protocols, and tightened his inner circle, his gaze hardening into unyielding gold whenever Williams's name was mentioned. The attacks extended beyond mere whispers. One evening, as Catherine left the office after a late meeting with Justin, a figure detached itself from the shadows of the underground parking garage. The air turned cold, heavy with an oppressive stillness that she now recognized as the precursor to shifter aggression. A man, not one of Justin's pack, stepped into the meager light, his eyes gleaming with a malicious intent. He was a low-ranking member of Williams's own corporate security team, a minor alpha, and his presence was clearly meant as a message. He said nothing, simply blocking her path, his posture radiating menace. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. Her mind raced, calculating distances, escape routes, but she was trapped. Before she could even consider screaming, a blur of movement. Justin, seemingly appearing from nowhere, was suddenly in between them. His shift was instantaneous, a ripple of muscle and fur beneath his tailored suit. He didn't fully transform, but the primal power radiating from him was enough. He was a formidable presence, his teeth bared in a silent, terrifying snarl, his eyes blazing pure gold. The alpha who blocked Catherine's pack visibly flinched, his bravado crumbling under Justin's raw dominance. With a guttural growl that reverberated through the concrete, Justin simply pushed the other alpha, not with brute force, but with a calculated shove that conveyed overwhelming power and absolute contempt. The man stumbled back, fear replacing the malice in his eyes, and then, without another word, he turned and fled into the darkness. Justin didn't turn back to human immediately. He stood for a moment, his chest heaving, his eyes still burning gold, a primal, protective aura surrounding him. Catherine felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated awe, mixed with a profound, unsettling relief. He had protected her. Not for the deal, not for the act, but with a raw, visceral intensity that bypassed all logic. When he finally shifted back, the change was seamless, his human form perfectly composed, but the intensity in his eyes remained. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low, rough with suppressed fury. Catherine shook her head, unable to speak. The encounter, the sheer, sudden violence of it had left her breathless. Justin simply nodded, his jaw tight, and took her arm, leading her swiftly to his waiting car. The incident forged a new, unspoken understanding between them. The threat was real, and Justin's protection was too. This escalation forced Justin and Catherine into an even closer collaboration, blurring the lines between corporate strategy and personal survival. Their late-night sessions in his penthouse office became the norm. They meticulously dissected Williams's business dealings, looking for weaknesses, for any leverage. Catherine's human analytical skills, her ability to see patterns in data and connect seemingly disparate pieces of information, proved to be an invaluable counterpoint to Justin's powerful instinct-driven strategies. She could sift through corporate filings, legal precedents, and market trends with a precision that amazed even Justin. She identified obscure loopholes, predicted Williams's next financial moves, and unearthed old, forgotten contracts that could be turned against him. During these sessions, the walls between them slowly crumbled. The penthouse, once a cold prison, became a shared space of intense focus and quiet companionship. Catherine observed Justin more closely than ever before. She saw the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, the way he sometimes rubbed the back of his neck when a problem felt insurmountable. He consumed vast amounts of black coffee, often forgetting to eat, his singular focus on the looming deal. She found herself, without conscious thought, bringing him plates of food, refilling his mug, or gently reminding him to take a break. He never acknowledged these gestures directly, but he accepted them, a silent shift in their dynamic. One particularly grueling night, after hours of poring over convoluted legal documents, Justin slammed a fist on his desk, the sound muffled by the thick wood. "It's a dead end," he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "Williams has covered every angle. He's tied up all the major investors, bought out all the potential competition. We have nothing left." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, his eyes closed. The air around him crackled with a raw, agitated energy that made Catherine's own nerves hum in sympathetic response. Through their nascent mate bond, she felt his despair, a cold, heavy weight settling in her own chest. It was overwhelming, a raw, aching pain that wasn't hers, yet felt deeply personal. Catherine hesitated. This was not about spreadsheets. This was about something much deeper. His vulnerability, raw and exposed, was a jarring contrast to his usual impenetrable facade. "There has to be something," she said, her voice soft. "A reason why he's so obsessed with this deal, beyond just money. A weakness." Justin opened his eyes, their golden hue dulled by weariness. He looked at her, truly looked at her, not as an employee, not as a mate for show, but as someone who saw beyond the mask. He sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. The silver pack, they're not just an investment opportunity for them. And this $2 billion, it's not just about profit for me. He paused, then began to speak, his voice low, almost a whisper, in the vast, silent office. He told her about his pack, the Blackwood Pack, not just as a corporate entity, but as a living, breathing community. He spoke of the ancestral lands, vast forests that bordered their current, more urbanized territory, lands that were beautiful, spiritually significant, and fiercely protected. Lands that, centuries ago, had been lost, seized by a rival alpha during a time of great weakness and betrayal within his own bloodline. The current alpha of those lands was a distant, ruthless cousin of William's. "My family," Justin continued, his voice growing rough, "lost everything: power, prestige, most of their territory. My grandfather, then my father, tried to buy back pieces of it, to reclaim what was ours. But they failed. They never had enough leverage, enough capital. This $2 billion deal with the Silver Pack, it's the only way. It's enough to buy back those lands outright, to reunite my pack with their heritage, to right a wrong that has haunted my family for generations." He ran a hand over his face, his weariness palpable. "It's about legacy, Catherine, about redemption, about finally putting my pack back where they belong." He looked at her, his golden eyes shadowed with an ancient pain that surprised her. "My father was consumed by it. Died trying to get it back." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. He was no longer the ruthless CEO. He was a burdened alpha, carrying the weight of his ancestors' failures, haunted by a past he couldn't change without this one colossal victory. He had opened a window into his soul, a place he meticulously guarded from everyone. Catherine felt a profound ache in her own chest, deeper than any mate bond hum. It was empathy, pure and simple. She saw the man beneath the billionaire alpha, the weight of history pressing down on him. Her resentment, once so sharp, began to dissolve, replaced by a fierce, unexpected protectiveness. She had seen his vulnerability, his very human need to right the wrongs of the past. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Catherine asked, her voice soft, devoid of accusation. "You just demanded I play a role. You treated me like a means to an end?" Justin's jaw tightened. He looked away, out at the distant city lights. I don't share weaknesses, not with anyone. I needed you to be effective. Emotion clouds judgment. Especially in my world, especially with something this critical." He sounded like he was reciting a mantra, a lifetime of ingrained alpha discipline. "But I'm your mate," Catherine pushed, her voice gaining strength, not from anger, but from a dawning realization of their unique connection. "You said that. If that's true, then you don't get to compartmentalize me. Not when your entire world is on the line. Not when my world is on the line, too." She took a hesitant step towards him, her courage fueled by the raw emotion emanating from him. "You need to trust me, Justin. Not just my skills. Me. All of me." Justin turned, his eyes meeting hers, a flicker of surprise in their golden depths. He saw the fire in her gaze, the unwavering resolve. He saw the truth in her words, echoed by the thrumming mate bond that now vibrated between them, a tangible chord of raw emotion. It wasn't just a physical pull, it was a soul-deep connection, responding to her call for honesty, for real partnership. His carefully constructed walls, built over years of ruthless ambition and solitary leadership, began to crack. He took a step toward her, then another, until they stood mere inches apart. Catherine could feel the heat radiating from him, the sheer power of his presence. But it no longer terrified her. It felt right. His eyes, full of a fierce intensity, searched hers. I can't afford distractions," Justin murmured, his voice rough, betraying the struggle within him. "Not now." "I'm not a distraction," Catherine whispered, her gaze unwavering. "I'm your partner, and partners don't keep secrets this big, not if they truly want to win." Justin's gaze softened, a profound weariness in his eyes giving way to something raw, unguarded. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, trembling slightly. The gesture, so hesitant from a man who commanded billions and entire packs, surprised her. "Catherine," he rasped, his voice thick with a new emotion. I didn't know how to do this, how to be this." He wasn't talking about the deal. He was talking about them, about the bond, about opening himself up. Without conscious thought, Catherine reached up, covering his hovering hand with her own. Her touch was gentle, reassuring. The contact sent a powerful jolt through both of them, an electric current that solidified the unspoken. The mate bond, once a whisper, roared to life. It was a dizzying rush of emotions. His vulnerability, his desperation, his growing possessiveness, and his undeniable desire for her. And her own burgeoning feelings, her surprising care for him, her fierce protectiveness, and a raw, elemental attraction that had nothing to do with contracts or money. Justin's breath hitched. His eyes, blazing golden, fell to her lips. The air thickened, charged with an unspoken tension and undeniable hunger. He lowered his head, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Catherine didn't. Her eyes drifted shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then his lips met hers. It was not a gentle, tentative kiss. It was raw, hungry and desperate, the culmination of weeks of unspoken longing, suppressed instincts, and undeniable pull. His mouth moved against hers with an urgency that stole her breath, demanding a response she was more than willing to give. Catherine's arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, melting into him. Heat bloomed everywhere their bodies touched, his hands on her waist, pulling her against his hard chest, her body molding perfectly to his. It was primal, consuming, a blazing fire that chased away all thought, all doubt. It was emerging, not just of lips, but of souls. The power of it was dizzying, overwhelming. Yet she met it with a fervor she hadn't known she possessed. Her fingers tangled in the soft hair at his nape, pulling him even closer, deepening the kiss, seeking to absorb every bit of the profound emotion that poured from him. The taste of him was intoxicating, a mix of power, desperation, and a sweetness she hadn't expected. This was the mate bond, fully unleashed, consuming them both. They broke apart, breathless, their chests heaving. Justin's golden eyes, dilated with desire, were fixed on her face, searching, as if trying to memorize every curve, every shadow. His thumb traced her lower lip, his touch sending shivers down her spine. The air between them crackled with the aftermath, thick with unspoken promises and unleashed passion. "Catherine," he rasped, his voice rough, thick with emotion. The use of her name, stripped of any formal title, felt incredibly intimate, a sacred whisper. She simply leaned into his touch, her eyes wide, still processing the raw power of what had just transpired. The rational part of her brain screamed at the impossibility, but her body, her soul, hummed with a profound sense of rightness. This man, this alpha, her boss, her kidnapper, he was her fated mate, and the bond was not a lie. The moment, however, was tragically short-lived. A sudden, insistent beeping from Justin's desk phone cut through the intimate bubble. Justin groaned, a sound of profound frustration, but his alpha instincts immediately took over. He pulled away from Catherine, regret etched on his face, though the golden intensity in his eyes remained. He moved to answer the call, his movements still slightly unsteady, as if resisting the very laws of gravity that pulled him toward her. He picked up the phone, his face hardening as he listened. Catherine watched him, a cold dread creeping into her heart. She felt the sudden shift in his emotions through their bond, a jolt of alarm, then disbelief, quickly followed by a searing, icy rage. Something was terribly wrong. "What?" Justin's voice, low and dangerous, filled the silence of the office. "The Silverpack's investment portfolio compromised? And the market intelligence? How could this happen?" He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the room, a stark, violent punctuation mark on their stolen moment of intimacy. Who had this? Who had this information? His eyes, blazing with fury, snapped to Catherine's. The raw, desperate passion that had moments ago consumed them vanished, replaced by a terrifying, cold suspicion. The mate bond, still thrumming between them, now vibrated with his profound anger and the dawning realization of betrayal. The question in his eyes wasn't just about the leak. It was about trust, about her, about everything. "Williams," he ground out, his voice a low snarl, "could only have done this if he had an inside source, a leak, someone within my own pack, someone I trusted with everything." His gaze swept the empty office, a desolate realization settling over his features. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal, a knife twisted into the heart of his carefully constructed world. Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the early morning air. The betrayal. It had happened, and Williams had orchestrated it, turning Justin's own trusted circle against him. The future of the $2 billion deal, and of Justin's entire pack, now hung precariously in the balance. The passionate moment they had just shared was eclipsed by a looming crisis, the bitter taste of betrayal tainting the sweetness of their kiss. The final blow to Justin's meticulous plans had just been struck. Chapter 5. The Unraveling and the Strategist's Rise. The silence in Justin's penthouse office was more deafening than any scream. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a world crumbling. The words from the phone call hung in the air, cold and stark. Compromised. Sabotaged. The $2 billion deal, the lifeline for Justin's pack, was no longer on the verge of collapse. It had plummeted, dragging Justin, his reputation, and the very future of the Blackwood pack down with it. Justin stood frozen, the phone still clutched in his hand, his usually impenetrable composure shattered. The golden fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced with a bleak, desolate despair that tore through the mate bond, flooding Catherine with an agony so profound it buckled her knees. It was a physical weight, a crushing despair that felt like her own heart was being squeezed in a vice. He wasn't just losing a deal. He was losing everything he had fought for, everything he had built on the promise of redemption and legacy. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on the sleek corporate reports, the intricate financial models, the very tools of his ambition. A raw, guttural growl ripped from his throat, not of anger, but of self-loathing. He looked like a king watching his kingdom burn, helpless and utterly alone. He slammed the phone down, the sharp clatter echoing the fracturing of his composure. "It's gone," he muttered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "All of it." Catherine wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, to stem the tide of despair that was threatening to consume them both through the mate bond. But he was pushing her away. Unconsciously, the connection that had moments ago hummed with shared passion now vibrated with rejection, with a raw need to face this ruin alone. His body was rigid, his shoulders hunched, his focus turned inward, consumed by the magnitude of the betrayal. He was retreating into himself, building walls faster than she could tear them down. He paced the office like a caged predator, each step heavy with defeat, the expensive rug doing little to soften the furious energy that radiated from him. His hands clenched and unclenched, his knuckles white. "How?" he snarled finally. How could this happen? Every precaution was taken, every angle covered. He stopped, turning to face the panoramic window, his back to her, unwilling to let her witness the raw devastation on his face. "I trusted them. I trusted my own. This is a weakness, my weakness, letting ambition blind me." The words were sharp, self-inflicted wounds, and Catherine felt each one through the bond. He wasn't just blaming himself for failing, he was blaming himself for trusting, for daring to believe in a path that had now led to utter ruin. And in that self-recrimination, she felt a subtle, chilling implication. His trust in her, the human mate, the unexpected variable, might also be crumbling. He had opened up to her, allowed himself to feel, and now, in his darkest hour, that very openness felt like a vulnerability he was desperate to shed. Catherine refused to let him retreat entirely. She had been an outcast, an invisible cog for too long. She knew what it felt like to be dismissed, to be deemed worthless. She wouldn't allow him to sink into that same abyss, not when their fates were now inextricably linked. More importantly, her sharp, analytical mind, which had always thrived on chaos, was already whirring, sifting through the wreckage, seeking patterns. "It wasn't your weakness," Catherine said, her voice soft but firm, cutting through the heavy silence. She took a tentative step towards him. "It was Williams's treachery, and someone helped him, someone on the inside." Justin flinched at the mention of Williams, the name a raw wound. He turned, his golden eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and despair. "And who would that be, Catherine? My most trusted beta? My loyal advisors? You think I just let a viper into my inner circle?" His voice was laced with a chilling sarcasm, a hint of his old, detached persona resurfacing, hardened by pain. Perhaps the human element was the weakest link all along, an outsider, someone easily manipulated. The insinuation was clear. He was blaming her, or at least allowing the doubt to fester. A cold knot formed in Catherine's stomach, echoing the familiar ache of being perceived as useless. Her eyes, however, did not waver. She met his gaze, refusing to back down. The mate bond, though fractured by his despair, still thrummed between them, a desperate plea for her to believe, to understand. No, Catherine stated, her voice steady, refusing to let her own hurt overshadow the urgency of the moment. Not me, and not necessarily the obvious choices. Williams is too smart for an open attack. He would strike at the core, the unexpected. She walked over to Justin's desk, her mind already sifting through possibilities, ignoring the lingering scent of his despair. The massive corporate failure, the ruined deal, the possible challenge to his alpha status. It was all a devastating puzzle, but Catherine thrived on puzzles. She scanned the monitors, which still displayed the grim reports of the financial damage, the leaked market intelligence, the compromised data. "Let's look at this again," she began, her tone professional, cutting through the emotional fog. "This level of compromise, especially of the Silverpack's private investment portfolio, would require intimate knowledge of your security protocols, not just digital, but physical. Who had access to all the systems? Not just the financial data, but the network schematics, the physical server locations, the backup protocols." Justin watched her, his expression unreadable, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He seemed to pull himself back from the brink of despair, his alpha mind, though wounded, responding to the call of strategy. He moved to the desk, standing beside her, still rigid, but no longer turning away. "My inner circle. Josh, of course, my chief financial officer, Lena, head of R&D, David, and my corporate attorney, Mr. Davies." He listed the names, each one a testament to years of trust. Catherine nodded, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, calling up different reports, cross-referencing files. Williams would have needed more than just a leak. He needed a way to tamper with the data, not just steal it, to make it look like a systemic failure from within Blackwood Enterprises. And timing. The attack hit right after our conversation, right after we solidified our bond. That's not a coincidence. She refrained from explicitly naming their intimate moment, but the unspoken knowledge hung between them. Justin's jaw tightened. "The leaked data," Catherine murmured, clicking through reports, "it included projections for our new energy initiative, projections that were still under review, sensitive. Only a handful of people had access to those early figures." She pulled up a secure access log. "And this is odd." She pointed to a specific entry, highlighted on the screen. An access point marked as Legacy System Diagnostic. It was used yesterday for less than 30 seconds from an external IP address. But it bypassed all external firewalls. It's almost as if it was granted access from inside the system, but disguised as an external connection. Her mind was racing, connecting seemingly innocuous details. Her old training, her meticulous attention to detail was kicking in, fueled by a frantic need to salvage what was left. Justin leaned closer, his golden eyes fixed on the screen, his alpha mind now fully engaged, sifting through the implications. "A backdoor," he breathed, his voice low. "Someone created a backdoor, but disguised it as a diagnostic. Brilliant, and utterly untraceable unless you know what to look for. And it's connected to an old server, one that was supposed to be decommissioned. It houses all our archive data, the very data I spent last week reorganizing." A sudden chilling realization hit her. The same archive Josh was testing the ancient codes on. The constellation patterns. "Josh," she whispered, her eyes widening. Justin stiffened beside her, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Josh? My beta? That's impossible. Josh has been with my family for decades. He's loyalty personified. He practically raised me." His voice was laced with disbelief, bordering on offense. The very thought was an affront to his deepest trust. "It wasn't Josh who created the back door," Catherine said quickly, understanding the gravity of her accusation. "But he might have given access unknowingly. Remember when he was testing that new ancient code encryption system on the old server, the one tied to star charts?" She pulled up old network schematics, tracing lines on the screen. If William somehow got access to that specific decryption key, or if he knew what to look for, he could have exploited that experimental access point, made it look like a diagnostic, used it to inject the malicious data and extract the genuine files. Justin's golden eyes narrowed, his mind working furiously, processing her words, correlating them with his own knowledge of his pack's internal systems. The anger and despair were still there, but now they were tinged with a terrifying clarity. The Silver Pack deal was meant to bring in new tech, new security protocols. Josh was obsessed with proving our current systems were flawed, that we needed the upgrade. He was eager to test experimental solutions. He was so focused on finding vulnerabilities, he might have overlooked one of his own making. Catherine clicked to another file. And look at this. This specific diagnostic was initiated from Williams' corporate network, but disguised as an internal IP. It's a ghost, but it needs an entry point. That old server, that experimental access, it's the only logical explanation. Williams used Josh's own meticulousness, his obsession with security, against him. The implication hung in the air, heavy and damning. Josh, unknowingly, had become Williams's unwitting tool, a pawn in a game he didn't even realize he was playing. The knowledge of such a profound, insidious betrayal, a trusted member of his own family becoming the instrument of his downfall, struck Justin deeply. He ran his hair through his hair, his earlier despair replaced by a cold, searing rage that made the mate bond thrum with a dangerous, unstable energy. Josh, he repeated, the name tasting like ash on his tongue. He would never betray me, not knowingly. No, not knowingly, Catherine agreed, her voice steady. But Williams is cunning. He would exploit every weakness, every vulnerability. He didn't just want to win the deal, Justin. He wanted to destroy you. And what better way than to make it look like an inside job orchestrated by your closest confidant? Her eyes met his, pleading for understanding, for belief. The mate bond pulsed, a silent echo of her conviction. She was telling the truth. She was seeing the truth. Justin stared at her, his alpha mind reeling, processing the unthinkable. The logical threads were there, woven meticulously by Catherine's brilliant analysis. It wasn't the kind of raw, instinctive truth his wolf usually responded to, but it was a truth nonetheless, undeniable in its precision. The initial fleeting thought of blaming her, the human outsider, evaporated completely. He had been blind. Consumed by his own despair, by the shock of the betrayal, he had missed the intricate, subtle clues that Catherine's analytical mind had so readily pieced together. He finally looked at her, truly looked at her. The anger in his eyes softened, replaced by a dawning realization of his own foolishness, his own doubt. The weight of his previous dismissal, his initial coldness towards her, pressed down on him. He had almost let his ingrained prejudices, his traditional alpha instincts, blind him to the truth staring him in the face. She, the human, the one he had chosen for pragmatic reasons, was proving to be his greatest asset, his most powerful weapon against Williams's insidious cunning. "You saw it," Justin murmured, his voice rough with a newfound awe. "You saw what my entire security team, what even Josh missed." He reached out, his hand gently grasping her arm, his touch solid, reassuring. The mate bond which had fractured moments ago began to knit back together, humming with a renewed sense of purpose, of profound connection. It's not just about seeing the numbers, Justin. It's about understanding people, understanding Williams's psychology. He wants to win, yes, but he also wants to humiliate you. And a betrayal from within, masked as an accident? That's his style. She looked at him, her heart aching with a fierce protective love. He was an alpha, a billionaire, but in that moment, he was also vulnerable, shattered by a betrayal he hadn't foreseen. "What do we do?" Justin asked, his voice low, filled with a newfound trust, a quiet surrender. He wasn't asking for her analysis anymore. He was asking for her lead. He was empowering her. Catherine's mind raced, her fear receding, replaced by a surge of exhilarating focus. The strategist within her, long suppressed by the mundane demands of corporate life, roared to life. This wasn't just about numbers, it was about strategy, about a counterattack. "Williams thinks he has you trapped," Catherine began, her gaze hardening. "He thinks he's exposed your weakness. but will turn his own cunning against him. She moved to the large digital display on the wall, calling up a complex web of corporate and pack connections. The Silver Pack will still be holding their final assessment in 2 days. Williams will present his own bid, expecting us to be in disarray, to withdraw. He'll gloat. That's his weakness, his arrogance. Justin watched her, his expression a mixture of fascination and fierce pride. The despair that had threatened to consume him was now replaced by a burning resolve. He saw his Luna, not just his mate, leading the charge. "We expose the traitor," Catherine continued, her voice gaining strength, "publicly, during Williams's final presentation. We don't just prove his data was doctored, we prove he orchestrated an insidious infiltration. We don't just defend, we attack. We show the Silver Pack that Williams is not only a liar, but a manipulator who abuses trust. And we show them that you, Justin, despite the setback, found the truth through integrity, that your pack with your chosen mate is stronger, more resilient, and more honorable than his." Justin's golden eyes gleamed with a predatory light. "Publicly," he repeated, a low rumble of satisfaction in his chest. The mate bond thrummed with a shared sense of purpose, a silent agreement to the audacious plan. "We need undeniable proof," Catherine stated, tapping a finger on a data point on the screen. "Not just the access logs, but a direct link, something that implicates Josh, yes, but also points directly to Williams's hand in orchestrating it. A communication, a payment, something irrefutable." She turned to Justin, her gaze unwavering. "You need to get Josh to talk. Without him knowing we suspect him, you need to pull him in, make him feel safe, and then you bait him." Justin's face was grim, but determined. "Josh, he'll be devastated. He's loyal, but easily swayed by those he respects. Williams has a way of twisting loyalty." "Then we use that loyalty," Catherine replied, her mind already moving 2 steps ahead. "Josh's sense of duty will be his undoing. We give him an opportunity to fix the problem he unknowingly created, a chance to prove his worth, a final test. And when he takes it, he'll expose Williams." The plan was audacious, dangerous, and incredibly risky. It required Justin to play a subtle, manipulative game, something he usually disdained. It required exposing a trusted member of his inner circle, but it was also brilliant. It leveraged Williams's arrogance, Josh's loyalty, and Catherine's unparalleled ability to connect disparate pieces of information. It turned Williams's strength into his ultimate weakness. Justin looked at Catherine, a profound admiration in his golden eyes. His despair had vanished, replaced by a fierce determination. She wasn't just his mate, she was the missing piece, the sharp mind that saw beyond brute force, the strategist who could navigate the complex human and shifter worlds with equal precision. "You do it your way," Justin said, his voice firm, unwavering. He reached for her hand, his fingers lacing with hers, the mate bond now humming with a steady, undeniable current of shared purpose, a promise of unwavering trust. Catherine squeezed his hand, a surge of power, unfamiliar yet exhilarating, coursing through her. This wasn't just about a $2 billion deal anymore. It was about proving Williams wrong. It was about saving Justin's pack. It was about protecting her mother, and it was about solidifying the undeniable bond that had transformed her from an invisible secretary into the true Luna of the Blackwood Pack, fighting side by side with the man who was now irrevocably her destiny. The intricate web of lies and betrayals that had almost destroyed them was about to unravel, and Catherine, the human strategist, would be the one to pull the final, devastating thread. Epilogue. 6 months had passed since the climactic confrontation that had nearly shattered Blackwood Enterprises and the Blackwood Pack. The $2 billion deal with the Silver Pack wasn't just secured, it had soared, exceeding all initial projections thanks to Justin's strategic prowess, and, more importantly, to Catherine's unparalleled insight. Williams, exposed by Catherine's meticulous unraveling of his deceit and Josh's unwitting cooperation, had been publicly disgraced and stripped of his alpha title. His corporate empire crumbled, and he faced exile from the shifter community, a fate worse than death for a once powerful alpha. The traitor within Justin's inner circle, whose identity Catherine had precisely pinpointed, was dealt with swiftly and justly, his betrayal never to be repeated. The penthouse, once a symbol of Catherine's gilded imprisonment, was now unequivocally their home. It hummed with a different energy, a warmth that had nothing to do with heated floors and everything to do with shared lives. The stark impersonal decor had softened, infused with Catherine's quiet touches, a vibrant plant here, a collection of old leathered-down books there, lending an air of comfortable, lived-in elegance. Justin's pack was thriving. The influx of capital from the Silverpack deal had allowed them to reclaim their ancestral lands, a vast expanse of forest Justin had often spoken of with yearning. It was a place of wild beauty, now protected and reintegrated into the pack's territory. This victory, fueled by Catherine's strategic brilliance, had solidified Justin's leadership beyond question. He was no longer just the young, ruthless CEO. He was a revered alpha, his power tempered by a newfound wisdom and compassion, a balance he attributed entirely to Catherine. Catherine, once the invisible secretary, was now Luna Catherine. The whispers that followed her were no longer tinged with suspicion, but with awe and deep respect. Pack members who had once doubted her human status now sought her counsel, recognizing the keen intellect and profound empathy that guided her decisions. Even Josh, initially skeptical, had become her most loyal supporter, his fiercely protective nature extending to her without question. He had been devastated by his unwitting role in William's plot, but was fiercely loyal to Catherine for uncovering the truth and ultimately saving them. One quiet evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of deep violet and fading orange, Catherine stood on the expansive terrace of the penthouse. The city lights twinkled below, a vast, complex tapestry she now understood in a way few others could. She could still see the corporate towers, the bustling streets, but now she also felt the pulse of the packs that moved within it, a hidden world she was irrevocably part of. Justin came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her gently against his chest. His familiar presence, a grounding mix of power and pine, was a comfort she had come to crave, a silent anchor in her often extraordinary life. The mate bond hummed between them, a steady, deep current of contentment, a silent conversation of shared thoughts and feelings that needed no words. "Thinking about the ancestral lands?" he murmured, his chin resting on her shoulder. His voice was a low rumble against her ear. Catherine smiled. "And how we secured them. It still feels unreal." He tightened his embrace. "It was real, and it was all you, Luna. Your mind, your strength. You saw what no one else did." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to cup his face, her gaze locking with his warm golden eyes. The ruthlessness that had once defined him was still there, but it was now softened, balanced by a profound tenderness. "We did it, Justin," she whispered, her smile soft. "Together." He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a slow, lingering kiss, filled with the promise of 1,000 more peaceful nights to come. It wasn't the desperate, consuming kiss of newly discovered passion, nor the strategic kiss of a facade. It was the kiss of two souls irrevocably intertwined, of a man who had found his true center and a woman who had found her undeniable place. 5 years melted into decades, each year a testament to the strength of their bond and the prosperity of their unified pack. The Blackwood pack, under Alpha Justin and Luna Catherine, became a beacon of unprecedented strength and wisdom. Their story of the human secretary who became a Luna and saved a powerful Alpha's legacy was whispered through generations, a legend of an unconventional love that defied all expectations. One late afternoon, Justin and Catherine sat on a bench overlooking a sprawling, verdant expanse of the newly reclaimed ancestral lands. Their two children, a spirited boy with his father's sharp golden eyes and an inquisitive girl with her mother's meticulous mind, chased fireflies across the twilight-dusted fields. Peace, a concept Justin had once scoffed at as a distraction, was now the quiet, steady rhythm of his heart. Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his. Her presence, her unique energy, was the scent of his home, his life, his very soul. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. Without a word, he looked at her, and in her eyes he saw their entire story reflected back at him. The initial distrust, the corporate intrigue, the devastating betrayal, the raw passion, and the ultimate, undeniable victory. They were no longer just a powerful Alpha and his Luna. They were simply home. Thank you for listening. What was your favorite moment in their story? Did Catherine's human wit surprise you? Or was Justin's transformation into a loving Alpha what truly hooked you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from our listeners. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling werewolf romance audiobooks. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next adventure. We can't wait to see you in the next one.